Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I hope all doing well.
Alaikum salam.
Uh, this is our third week for discussing or reflecting upon Supreme Sign, Ayatul Kubra. I just, like the lazy student, I just gazed over what we are going to talk today 20 minutes ago. And at each sentence, I was about to, I was so overwhelmed. Like, look at that. I mean, what it is talking about, something like that. So hopefully with this momentum, I want to just take this opportunity to have Colin Hocam again from UK and Mustafa Polat from Turkey to ponder on this masterpiece to call. So just to remember, last week we just started the Supreme Sign, and the motivation of Said Nursi Ustad was very Quranic as always, since he mentions in the Quran there are many verses paying our attention first to the skies or heavens. So with this motivation, he started pondering upon heavens, asking heavens about the Creator. And he just, gave us hints, how to read the universe, starting with the heavens. And this was the first degree, what he calls. And now we are getting into a subset of heavens. Even I'm going to ask the very first question about that. So, which is, atmosphere. Now we will just look at atmosphere, question or try to read atmosphere and how it relates our understanding to the Creator. So before starting, I want to ask Colin Hocam, we can maybe start warming up, relating how from the big piece to the smaller pieces, Ustad Nursi is somehow narrowing but getting deeper and deeper in reflection, if we agree. I mean, is this how to perceive Supreme Sign, like starting from the whole piece and getting subparts or parts, basically from whole to the parts, but of course deepening and deepening? Is this how our reflection going?
Bismillah. I like the fact that your question, I think, is informed by your expertise in systems, because you're looking at the whole and the parts and the relationship between them. And there is, you see in the Risale, there is lots of emphasis on the homogeneity of whole and parts, the synergies between the whole and their parts. Ustad uses them as a way of understanding the unity in the creation. The unity of the whole and the parts, and not just in the context of the heavens and the skies, which I think is this next part that we're looking at now, the atmosphere, right. The skies above our heads. But I'm also struck by the fact that this is, in a sense, a replication of the Abrahamic journey, when Nabi Ibrahim والسلام, looks at the heavens and tries to work out which of these heavenly bodies is the Creator. Maybe it's a rhetorical question. And he sees that they all set. You know better than I do the story. La uhibbul afalin. I love not those that set. And also Ustad Nursi here is starting his journey by looking at the skies. Well, first, last week he looked at the further heavens, the space, the part of the creation that we can't see. And now this week he's concentrating on that part of the unseen that we can see, in a sense, because I understand that the samawat, which is what he's talking about, corresponds to anything that is spirituality. And we know that Malakut and the Ghaib is in two sections, really. There is Ghaib al-Ghaib, which we can never understand. That is absolute Ghaib, absolute unseen, which is the realm of Allah. And there is the unseen that we can understand something of, and that is the Ghaib al-Nisbi, the relative unseen. And I think the fact that we have outer space and we also have the skies and the atmosphere, they are correspondences of the spiritual realm. So everything accords with what is happening in the spiritual realm. So Samawat wal Ard can be understood both physically as the skies and space and the earth, but they can also be understood as spirituality and materiality. So this is what comes to mind when I read this first two sections, and I don't think that has answered your question.
Oh, wonderful! I think it's very nice.
But this is what springs to mind.
Thank you very much, Mustafa. What about you? How do you relate this skies and atmosphere?
Yeah, Üstad, once we read, when we can comment on this even more. But Colin Hocam put it really well. It's not about just the physical realm that we think it's like including it's not just about stars and galaxies or the planets. When Quran mentions and also Ustad mentions about skies, it also includes the angels, the world that is unseen, and Allah's actions in those realms and different levels of skies. Samawat doesn't just mean the sky. So I guess once we start reading, we might have a better understanding of how deeply, alive and vibrant the atmosphere, the skies are.
Right. So wonderful. We can with this we can just start. Then that wondrous place of gathering known as space or the atmosphere begins thunderously to proclaim to that traveler, come as a guest to the world. Look at me, you can discover and find through me the object of your search, the one who sent you here. The traveler looks at the sore but kind face of the atmosphere and listening to the awesome but joyous thunderclaps perceives the following. The clouds, suspended between the sky and the earth, water the garden of the world in the most wise and merciful fashion, furnish the inhabitants of the earth with the water of life, modify the natural heat of life, and hasten to bestow aid wherever it is needed. In addition to fulfilling these and other duties, the vast clouds capable of filling the heavens sometimes hide themselves with their parts retiring to rest so that not a trace can be seen, just like a well-disciplined army showing and hiding itself in accordance with sudden orders. Then the very instant the command is given to pour down rain, the clouds gather in 1 hour, or rather in a few minutes. They fill the sky and await further orders from their commander. I think this is a good place to stop, since it is talking about clouds and it's going to switch to wind in the next paragraph. How do clouds talk about the creator? I think that's the point. Mustafa, maybe we can start by you. Are there any particular parts that are striking for you, more than others, maybe?
These are the things that we are, we get used to see every day. Ustad is calling it, ulfet, we don't take, special call, we don't look at as carefully as we are supposed to do. And Ustad is, pointing and hinting towards these, wondrous actions on the sky. In my city, it's in especially winter time, it's the weather is so smoky and dirty, and then when it rains, there is this distance I can see a long distance from my house. It's become so clear, like crisp clear, as we say, like glass. And it's wondrous how Allah puts this order, even though humankind, especially us, making it dirty, Allah puts a system in place, and we take it for granted, and we get used to it, but it's so wondrous, and we have to put special caution. We have to be careful, look deeply into how Allah makes this order. And tons of water is flying over the sky above our heads, and we have to be thankful of this.
That's it, Colin Hocam.
Yeah,
I'm
clouds.
sure you have a lot of stuff, but before you starting,
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question. Like my first question here, first I'm fascinated, like how, when I look at the sky, how can I mean, nothing calls me, here, the sky's clouds call Said Nursi, like they say, look at me. But these days, nothing is telling me that. I mean, clouds don't ask or don't, say this word to me. Why is that so? I mean,
I think because
nature talk to us, in other words, I don't hear their words,
we close our ears, our spiritual ears, because everything is calling out to us just by its existence. If you go out of your house and you suddenly see this huge cumulus cloud, like a huge white ship, sailing through the blue sky, that's calling out to you. It's huge, it's vast, and the azama of it, the awesomeness of it. We're not attuned to actually being struck by wonder anymore. We are distracted. We have so many digressions in our life, so many distractions. But the clouds are still calling out, just as they called out, 1,400 years ago to the Prophet, ﷺ, just as they called out 100 years ago to Ustad. They are calling out now, but we choose not to listen, I think. And you're not the only one, obviously, and you may be using yourself rhetorically as an example out of humility, but that's not the point. Generally, we don't listen spiritually, and we don't look. But if you do look, the clouds are there, and they're amazing things. As this passage says, you can be walking along and there are no clouds, and then suddenly in the space of minutes, all of the particles of the clouds have been brought together and knitted together. And for that reason, Allah is known as Munshi as-Sahab, the one who makes insha on the clouds, the one who drives the clouds together. And I'm told by physicist friends that if you are able to look through an electron microscope at the very, very tiny particles, you can sense that they are moving like clouds. I don't know whether that is just an urban myth, but apparently the subatomic particles are moving like clouds. And also in the Quran, it says if you look at the mountain, you think it's stable, but actually it's moving like clouds. So clouds are very important. They're very important also because, as it says here, they water the garden of the world in the most wise and merciful fashion. In other words, everything that we get from the earth comes from the clouds, because it's rain that comes from the clouds. Without the clouds, we can't eat. So all of our vegetables, all of the vegetation, all of our meat, because obviously cattle are feeding on vegetation, the vegetation comes from the earth, which has been impregnated by rain from the clouds. It makes great sense because Nursi starts usually with rububiyah, with lordliness, with nurturing and sustaining. And the clouds are symbols, par excellence. They are symbols of nurturing and sustaining. So it's no accident, that he starts with looking up, because we do look up anyway. We can't help but look up. And looking at the clouds, because it is the clouds which, on a causal level, are the occasion for the growth of everything that we eat from Earth.
Yeah, so so nice and so rich. A lot of the dig with clouds. So at this point, also, do you want to comment on this wise and merciful? You used particular two words, right, mentioned here, like how clouds relate to the wiseness or wisdom.
Well,
I
the
think we understand the other part, but
Yeah.
wisdom, how can we? It looks like random, like how clouds are organized, even how the rain falls. I mean, it feels like they're, complicated. And I mean, I think wisdom is not as obvious as the mercy.
Well, wisdom is to do with purpose. Here, I understand, and I'm not thinking in terms of does the rain fall in a wise manner. I think obviously it does, but as you say, because rain cannot be, it cannot be forecast. You cannot understand before exactly when the rain will come. It's one of those few things that we can never know. So I'm not saying that it falls, I'm not claiming that it falls in a particularly wise manner. I'm sure it does, but I can't prove that, obviously. But what I can understand from wisdom is that wisdom is to do with purpose. And the purpose of the clouds is to be a kind of seedbed for everything that is vegetative on Earth and everything that we use for food, because it comes from the heavens. And also, as Mustafa was corroborating before, the mulk and malakut, we are in mulk, and everything comes from malakut to mulk. Everything comes from Allah and from the angels to this realm. And that is also paralleled by everything coming from the samawat to the ard, from the heavens to the earth, both spiritually and literally. So the rain falls to the earth,
Very
and then
nice.
the earth is impregnated. And that is the wisdom of clouds. The wisdom of clouds is that they should serve to be a kind of incubator for, a seedbed for the food that we eat, for the sustenance that nurtures us and sustains us. And of course, that is a mercy as well. So wisdom and mercy, very clearly, they are key here.
Yeah, when you said the purpose, and I think it very nicely coincides with, nowadays one of the technologies is cloud technologies. Although it's a different context, I think, since clouds potentially, hold this mercy and wisdom, it's like you can reach at any time, or it's available at any time, at any space. It's like the logic of this technological cloud systems, so you can reach information, this and that, at any time, something like that. So even it gives us a way to read the benefits or the wisdom and the mercy behind the clouds.
He also anthropomorphizes them here, and he talks about the clouds sometimes hiding themselves, with their parts retiring to rest so that not a trace can be seen. In other words, the clouds disperse and then they come back again, and then they disperse and then they come back again. And this is a whole kind of process of insha, they're being built up and then they disperse and they're built up. And this is just a cycle, as with all of the other cycles that we are witness to. Rain is another cycle, and it's an absolutely awesome cycle, and he makes it in a sense immanent. He makes it familiar to us by anthropomorphizing it, and I like the way that he does that.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, very nice perspective.
I also want to point out to the question you asked about wise and merciful. So wise is also referring to, as Colin Hocam suggested, refers to the order, the system, the perfectly balanced system that's in place, that's put in place by Allah. There is very sensitive calculations, mathematical equations that goes into probably how this system goes in balance. It's maybe beyond the capacity. It's to the point. It's almost beyond the capacity of humankind to understand and to make sense of there is people say there is this law and that law, the clouds work in this way, but it's pretty much very difficult to understand fully how clouds form and why they hide and how they come into place. That's why the what do you call the weather conditions, when people make predictions, they're not able to do it. Let's say if you want to know what's going to be the weather like next week, there is no certain answer for that, because there is an order, but that order is not fully known to ourselves, to us as humankind. If you let's assume there were no clouds in the sky, and if you ask to a scientist this kind of concept, and people probably would say when water comes to a point, to a degree of heat, temperature, it evaporates, and the gas goes up on the sky to the atmosphere. There is no possibility of this gas to hang on a certain level and to form, to get together and form as some sort of form, a physical, shape. It's so amazing, it's almost the oceans are flying over the sky. They hold so much, tons and tons of water on top of our heads. It's, it's so wondrous. Even scientifically, if you try to make sense of it, it's so difficult. It's so well ordered and well planned, and it's full of mercy, because that's the almost source of life, to the point. Without the rain there will be no vegetation, as Colin Hocam suggested, and without the vegetation there will be no life. So it's so wondrous to think about it.
That's a great image, though. There, it's a great image that Mustafa has invoked there. The oceans flying through the heavens.
Right.
You would think that this would be absolutely full of chaos, but as he said, it's very orderly and it's done in a very wise fashion. I'd also like to remind people listening that there's a verse in Quran, أَفَلَا يَنْظَرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. Then do they not look at it's usually translated ibil as camel. Do they not look at the camels, how they're created? And I pondered this for a long, long time, and I think we've discussed it before. I was thinking that, there are lots of people who never have an opportunity to see camels. Maybe today you can see pictures of them, but ibil, another meaning for ibil is cloud. So we can understand this as, do they not look at the clouds and see how they're created? Now, everyone sees clouds. There's no one on earth that won't have seen a cloud at some point. So I think this is one of the miracles of Quran, that initially it was understood to be ibil, to be camel, but there is at least one scholar who says that it can also mean clouds, and I think that's interesting.
Very nice relation. Thank you. If you don't have more words on this paragraph, we can move. Then, the very instant the command is given to pour down rain, the clouds gather in 1 hour, or rather in a few minutes, they fill the sky and await further orders from their commander. Okay, we stopped here. Next, the traveler looks at the wind in the atmosphere and sees that the air is employed wisely and generously in such numerous tasks that it is as if each of the inanimate atoms of that unconscious air were hearing and noting the orders coming from the monarch of the universe without neglecting a single one of them. It performs them in ordered fashion and through the power of the monarch. Thereby, it gives breath to all beings and conveys to all living things the heat, light, and electricity they need, and transmits sound as well as aiding in the pollination of plants. Yeah, this is the wind part related with atmosphere. So he picked you know, the clouds in the atmosphere. Then next, he's picking the wind. Who wants to start, Mustafa or Colin Hocam, about the wind and how it relates to the monarch of the universe? Maybe Colin Hocam, this time starting.
I was hoping you would say Mustafa.
This is this part.
I read, this is one of the first things I ever read from Risale, and now after all these years, the treatise, the Kubra, and now after 40 years, I'm reading it again. I have read it in between parts of it, but looking at this very opening passage, I realized one of the wisdoms of starting with the heavens and the skies, and then the wind, the clouds, and then the winds. Wind is very important also in the Quran, because we know that ruh, human ruh, is from the same root as wind, rih. And also nafs as well, comes from nafasa, which is to breathe. So the nafs and the ruh have a kind of affinity with the wind. So we have to bear in mind that, the employment of the wind, there is that life force which the wind epitomizes. And the wind carries good tidings, even Quran talks about, because of course the wind also carries seeds from plants, and it pollinates. The wind drives the rain, so the wind and the rain have a kind of symbiosis; they're working together. And as I said, the wind is a pollinator, so pollen comes from plants and is taken on the wind, and it goes hither and thither, goes here and there. So the wind again is employed in works of sustaining and nurturing, the same as the rain, same as the clouds. So this rububiyah, this lordliness, this nurturing and sustaining with wisdom, with generosity, with order, and with beauty, is happening in front of our eyes, throughout the seasons, and it changes. It's always in flux. Wind is another wonderful thing, just to listen to, and to watch the results of the wind. And again, very interestingly, you can't see the wind; you can only see the results of it. Just as you can't see the spirit, but you can see the results of it. So I'm just thinking of parallels here and correspondences.
Yeah, I like that. I benefited a lot, they are resembling each other, nafs, ruh, wind, and what they bring to us. Mustafa?
Yeah, so I just reminded, there is a theory of chaos in science. And in that, I remember reading a scholar was talking about the butterfly effect. So, the wind is one of those things that is so complex for humankind to understand the results of it. But there is an equation, mathematical equation. Again, it's so it's so complex. There is an equation. It's so complex, but it's impossible for us to calculate them. So again, going back to the name of wise, a wind starts at some place at the ocean. So going back to the butterfly effect that I heard of, a wind starts at at some part of the ocean in some part of the world, and that wind might affect the wind that is caused by the wings of butterfly may cause a storm at another place of the earth, they say. So
connected.
So they are so connected. Yeah, exactly. They are so connected, and Allah puts all these connections together in a very wise way, to the point it's impossible for us to conceive, to understand. But with that wind, Allah, makes wondrous actions that include again the cause of life, Without the wind, there will be no pollination. Without pollination, it's all, it's like a chain reaction. They are all connected to each other. It's also very interesting that Ustad mentions electricity here. I don't know, maybe we can talk about it a little bit, but we know we now produce electricity from wind. There's wind power, but it's a recent phenomenon. I don't know, Ustad, is he referring to the thing that we are trying to, advance as technology, or is it something beyond what we know that is related to the other creatures, animals, or something of that sort that I don't know of? But so the wind, the weather is also, transferring heat, light, electricity. If in the case of atmosphere in general, it's also transferring the electromagnetic waves that Ustad talks about in another place of Risale-i Nur as Hüve Nüktesi.
Right, this
So
is
it's,
exactly the point, I think, Hüve Nüktesi,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So it's so wondrous, we're trying to make sense of it. But when you really think of it, all these, now we're talking to each other, and all this information is passing through the atmosphere within, a blink of an eye, even, shorter period of time. This is unbelievably, amazing how information is transferred within, tenths of a second, splits of a second. We can hear each other. One is in America, another is in England, and I'm in Turkey.
That is
It's so
amazing,
amazing.
actually. Now that you
Yeah,
mention it, it is amazing, and we just don't think about it at all,
yeah,
because every day we became used to it. And this is negligence, this is ghafla. We became negligent. We lost our ability to wonder, like a small child. And we have to try to find that again. And I think it's because we don't reflect enough. Why does Ustad use electricity? That's amazing. Why would he use electricity? Is there a connection? This is going to be a very, very, very basic, childlike question. Lightning, is that electricity? Or is it?
I think in this context, he's not talking about the lightning.
No,
he's talking
no.
about the atoms and how
Right.
this
But
particle.
what is lightning? Because lightning is also
No, it's a kind of
conducted
electricity. Yes, that's right.
It is. So it's conducted through the air as well. And
Yes, that's right.
so the air is taking rain. The wind is blowing the rain. There is lightning. Everything is going on up there, and we just can't imagine it at all. It's so busy
Yeah.
up there, It should be chaos. If we tried to do that, if we try to organize the cosmos in a way that, even replicated it just to one degree, we would cause chaos. We wouldn't be able to do it. I mean, it all takes place, without us knowing how.
Yeah,
Amazing.
it's so complex. It's intertwined into each other. It's so, it's very too complex for us to to make sense of, to conceive, to the point where we can the only thing we can say is it's a chaos. Because from outside, with a limited brain that we have, the only thing we can see, looking at all of these things all coming together at the same time, it's we can only put it as a chaos.
But people
But
say,
in reality,
okay,
it's so perfect system.
people say, well, okay, but science explains it all, as if that makes it any less wondrous. It doesn't make it less wondrous. Science explains how it happens, but why does it happen? Why does it happen at all? Why should it be there? What's it telling us? It's it's just amazing.
Yeah, it's so amazing. I was watching a documentary, talking about how Einstein, changed the perspective with respect to gravity. So all science, or all, scientific endeavor, let's say, trying to understand how it works, and it evolves. It doesn't stop there, and most likely they contradict each other. So the last thing was the gravity. Everybody thought that there's something pulling, everything down. So what is called gravitational force. But Einstein in a way shows that it is the space bending that pulls everything down. So even this, with this notion, space bending, you know, still it takes us to another level of, you know, reflection, like mentioned here. Look at it, anything like your phone, your computer, whatever, wherever it is located, the space surrounding it is bent instantaneously. So every particle surrounding it understands or takes the command so that they are bent together. So space is kind of an architecture that we don't see with our eyes, but definitely when you look at from the scientific perspective, we will see some molds, you know, atomic molds all around us reacting to all physical existence.
You know, Ustad gives the example somewhere that I don't remember right now, the example of a soldier and the commander. So, you know, imagine of a perfect commander with perfect soldiers, and the soldiers are obeying the you know, all the orders in a perfect manner. The soldiers are making moves in multiple ways. Let's say it's the soldiers jumping at the same time, and, you know, shouting at the same time, or, you know, clapping hands at the same time, and moving one side and another side, and then, you know, jumping and blowing a whistle, or, you know, doing all these multiple things all at the same time in a, you know, and in sudden changes. In every instant they do something else. It's like that, you know, it's like all soldiers, the air, the wind, the atmosphere, every atom is like a soldier, and doing, you know, it's transmitting electromagnetic waves at the same time, it's transmitting light at the same time, it's transmitting heat at the same time, and multiple waves all at the same time, and pollinating the, you know, flowers at the same time, and it's all happening all at the same time with all these, you know, very, you know, perfect calculations, and they're all, you know, obeying all these orders all at the same time with, you know, without any, you know, error. It's so amazing to see and try to understand how wondrous Allah's actions are.
That's the outcome,
Subhanallah.
right? Subhanallah, in a way. I'm just praying, you know, may Allah make our, you know, pondering this deep all the time to get into the reality of existence in a way.
I think Mustafa made the most important point there of today's session, is that all of these things are commanded, you know, they're all acting like soldiers, they're all under orders. Otherwise, there is no explanation for it. Because if you are a materialist, you would have to say that every particle needs to have infinite knowledge, because it has to engage with other beings, with lots of other beings, and those beings have to engage with other beings, and those other beings have to engage with other beings, and then so on exponentially until we're talking about the whole of the cosmos. So one particle must be able to have the intelligence, the intellect, and the foreknowledge of a God. So instead of accepting just one God, they want to, or they would have to accept as many gods as there are particles in the creation. And Mustafa made this point. Because that is a ridiculous notion, the only alternative, and there is only one alternative, and that is that the particles are acting under orders. I think this is the biggest take-home point from this particular passage. At the end of the day, that wisdom has to be attributed to one who has absolute wisdom, and not to the particles themselves, because that is just a superstition. So thank you, Mustafa. That was a very, very apropos point that you made.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You start making the point somewhere else, but I just remembered it.
And also, when we started, you know, the introduction of this supreme sign, over there, Ustad was discussing about the doubts of this age, right? Abysses of this age. So over there, the last thing, although we did not discuss, it was about azamet, kibriya, you know, how do you translate it? So the enormousness or hugeness of the monarch. it is also very, I think, logical. Like when we talk about science, knowledge, conception, understanding with our minds or collective minds, it comes to a point that I need to accept that there is an order, but this time another doubt, like how come there exists, I mean, there's an existence so huge. So it's the Azamet, coming in front of us at this point. And it's very reasonable for Nursi to discuss, Azamet as addressing the issue of this type of abysses at that point.
I think,
Colin Hocam, I mean, when you bring it to this point, the only thing that would make me reject, would be I would not be able to understand the Azamet in the first place.
I think your invocation of the abyss is absolutely spot on and necessary at this point, because the only alternative would be a world, a materialistic world, full of superstition, full of darkness, full of despair, and it would be an abyss. Materialism is an abyss, because what it says is you have a few years on earth and then you will be annihilated. Nothing means anything. The cherry tree doesn't say anything about anything else apart from the cherry tree, and that applies to everything else as well. It becomes an abyss of darkness, of desperation, of despair, lack of hope. And what Ustad is doing is giving us here a way of reading the creation which will save us, deliver us from that abyss, that abyss of ignorance. The abyss is entered through the gate of ignorance, basically. And what he's doing, he's handed us a key, a tilsim, to use his own lexicon, but a way of understanding, decoding the creation. So he knows that there is an abyss there waiting for people who are doubting and denying. He wants us not to fall into that abyss. So he gives us a language to use to understand the cosmos in the correct way.
Recently we found, I noticed a nice wording. A friend of mine here, he's Turkish also, just showed that to me. I liked it very much. The word is repurposing. So I think they are using repurposing in social literature, like you're using the data for repurposing. So you are just initiating a purpose. With that purpose, you're making use of the data. So when you said Ustad Nursi here decoding, so it's, I think, similar to say we are all, potentially repurposing using the vast data that comes to our minds and hearts from the universe.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that fits.
If you don't have anything more to say on this point, I think we have nice time to switch to the other part of the atmosphere.
Please go ahead.
The traveler then looks at the rain and sees that within those delicate, glistening, sweet drops sent from a hidden treasure of mercy, there are so many compassionate gifts and functions contained that it is as if mercy itself were assuming shape and flowing forth from the dominical treasury in the form of drops. It is for this reason that rain has been called mercy. Although I think we did talk about, rain and mercifulness, this and that, is there anything left over with respect to the drops of the rain and how it is related to mercy?
Again, Ustad is making this correspondence. He's looking at rain and he's seeing mercy. So he's making a correspondence between the physical phenomenon of rain, water, and the immaterial spiritual phenomenon of mercy. He's a correspondentialist, Nursi, which it's really heartens me a lot that he makes these correspondences all the time. No, I couldn't say anything that would be as eloquent and beautiful as this passage, so I'm not going to say anything.
Mustafa?
Harun Hocam, you also mentioned about the gravity, the gravitational force. We know the rain goes down and gets speed when it drops, but it comes to a certain point and stops speeding, right? So there is another law, I guess, that Allah puts in order, that the rain, the droplets goes down in a certain speed. If it's accelerated further, it might have caused a lot of damage to the earth, to the everything that's underneath. And there is again there is a merciful order. The order itself is also very merciful, the way it's put in place. The drops may have combined, it might become a much bigger when it pours, but it's so tiny, very small little drops. It only causes us it gives you good feelings when you see rain coming down, even the sound that it makes, right? It's almost a romantic scene when the rain comes down.
It definitely is. It definitely is. Yeah, I was going to ask a question. Isn't the fact that some things are fall faster than others just to do with relative density?
What is that? Relative density.
Yeah, so some drops are bigger than others, so they travel faster.
I don't know if that's the case.
Because people invoke gravity all the time, but actually gravity has never been seen, it's never been proven. It's an assumption that's made because it makes understanding things easier, I think. No, it's just a question. Doesn't you don't have to follow it through. It's okay.
I had read some about it. I mean, the only thing different comes to my mind is the shape of the rain. So the scientist person was talking about the shape of the raindrops. So they are designed in a way that they come together. Actually, they attach at that point, and some drops attach to each other, but they cannot grow as big as to be harmful in our sense here in this context. They just split again. So a lot of drops combine, but also split. And they are not individually coming drops. They're definitely uniting, splitting, but of course behind, again, we can read the wisdom. So there's a limit, like they cannot get as huge as, let's say, very big, this big ball, but still they can grow to some extent. But even why do they unite? Why do they split at some level? Even in the first place, why drop? It has its own shape. Why does drop or droplet has its own shape? So
interesting. Yeah.
There are a lot of things going on. Yeah.
There's also hail, right? The ice cubes, like little ice drops that comes down.
Ice drops. I think it's later, but you can pick it here. Yeah, ice drops. Another thing.
Yeah, that's also a similar phenomenon. It has the same thing. It doesn't get so big that it cause damage, but it's always in a certain size. Right?
It's also interesting, although with hail damage, in US it's an issue with insurance. I had it also once. Whenever the hail is down, your roof somehow will get some damage. So, but here, of course, it's to read as Ustad suggests here. It could be a way bigger damage. It could threaten our lives, this and that. I mean, it's a relative damage. Actually, it's just showing us the mercy. It's not the damage to concentrate on, I think. But most of the time, we are looking at the sore face, like, oh, today is raining or hail damaged my roof, this and that. So this is the general, tendency to read. But here, the read is the mercy and wisdom. It's completely different, I would say, even the opposite.
Maybe it's another mercy of Allah that Allah hits us on our heads. Like, look at me, look at the sky, and try to think about it. With the hail, when it hits our head, it's like a little slap on our head. Raise your head and look at the sky, how it is coming down. Try to think about it. Try to make sense of it. Maybe there's another type of mercy, I would say.
Right. Cezmabi wrote, like dropping off the pebbles from the beaks above it birds. If the raindrops fell down with that speed, life would be a nightmare. Yeah, exactly.
I think the hail is showing us what could be, but isn't, because Allah is so Rahim. If He wants to, I've seen some of those huge, big hailstones, which look like birds' eggs, as big as birds' eggs. Fortunately, we don't get them that much in this country, but in America, I've seen really, really big hail. As Harun is saying, it can damage cars and it can damage buildings, but it's also a rahmah, you know. It's frozen
Yeah.
rahmah.
It's always relative, you know, relative to what it could be. It's definitely mercy. Okay, so then the lightning. Next, the traveler looks at the lightning and listens to the thunder, and this is sees, I think, sees that both of these two are employed in wondrous tasks. Then, taking his eyes off these, he looks to his own intellect and says, "Is this the thing? I mean, is this the what is that conclusion of the story?" So we see a lot of stuff during the day, but in the end, I should turn back to my intellect and say. So I like this turnbacks. Taking his eyes off, he looks to his own intellect and says. The inanimate, lifeless cloud that resembles carded cotton has, of course, no knowledge of us. When it comes to our aid, it is not because it takes pity on us. It cannot appear and disappear without receiving orders. Rather, it acts in accordance with the orders of a most powerful and compassionate commander. First, it disappears without leaving a trace, then suddenly reappears in order to begin its work. By the command and the power of a most active and exalted, a most magnificent and splendid monarch, it fills and then empties the atmosphere, inscribing the sky with wisdom and erasing the pattern. It makes of the sky a tablet of effacement and affirmation, a depiction of the gathering and the resurrection. By the contriving of a most generous and bountiful, a most munificent and solicitous sustainer, a ruler who regulates and disposes, it mounts the wind, and taking with its treasures of rain, each as heavy as a mountain, hastens to the aid of the needy. It is as if it were weeping over them in pity, with its tears causing the flowers to smile, tempering the heat of the sun, spraying gardens with water, and washing and cleansing the face of the earth. Oh, this is so huge. Okay, so intellect, I think it's kind of a summary of whatever we have seen foregoing. But in this summary, of course, I think here the concentration is on more the attributes of the creator, of the monarch. So do you want to talk about this paragraph, Mustafa?
Yeah, it's Ustad's way of explaining the things we have been talking about. He puts it in a very beautiful way. How we should understand and make sense of the things that Ustad have depicted before about the sky. Yeah, there is the wisdom, there is the orderliness and there is the instant obeying of the the soldiers to the commander, and it's all in a it's full of mercy. It's put in a place with full of mercy, and it changes so fast, to the point Ustad puts it in a way what he was saying. It's a sky, a tablet of effacement and affirmation. Is that is it to refer to the speed of change? Is that what you understand from this?
This yazar bozar tahta, right?
Yeah. So this is this. It's so fast. It's changing so fast, right? Tablet of effacement and affirmation. So this is a depiction of gathering and resurrection. So this is also a hint that Allah will also resurrect. It's Allah is resurrecting everything in time and time again, and Allah will also resurrect everything.
Even isn't this part so deep?
Right.
Like he just takes us to the resurrection, which is one of the most pillars of Iman. So how come, all of a sudden, of course, we are talking about seeing the creator in the creator, but here even he's taking it further, like he sees the resurrection.
We trying to, it's so big of a change. We have a hard time to understand as humankind how all of these things will get disappear and a new world will come. But in reality, this is happening every day. Isat is trying to point out to us to make us understand these changes are happening every day and every second. So this is not something new. It's not something unusual. Allah is making this every day, and He's powerful of these things, doing these things, and so He will do it all together in a certain time in the future, and this is not beyond His capacity in any way. And He's promising this, and He will do it, and we have to believe in it. And this is so logical.
Colin Hocam, last words before closing.
Here, of course, he has been making tafakkur up until now, and now it's the time for ta'aqul. He has to put his intellect to work. And what he's saying is that, all of these things which are happening on this vast tablet of effacement and affirmation, lawh mahfuz wa ithbat, cannot happen of its own, on its own. It has to be at the behest, at the request of a commander who brings together all of these things with an order and with a knowledge and with a wisdom which no single particle can actually possess. So we have to come to that conclusion. The only alternative is that everything is a god, every particle is a god. Well, that is completely precluded. We know that. So this is just a start at the end of that passage now, making ta'aqul, which is, of course, what we have to do.
Yeah, it was so nice again, so deep and so enlightening session for me. Thank you very much. And I also see Mehmet's brother Mehmet Su just wrote, I heard that every droplet is being carried and brought to us by one angel, and that angel never comes back to earth again. I don't know, Colin Hocam, you're the expert with angels, or that's your interest, I think.
Every amr of Allah is carried by an angel. It's brought from malakut to mulk, and so yeah, that would make sense. Every angel is bearing the names of Allah in a particular configuration, and rain has its own unique configuration, and the angels that bring the rain are actually created out of rain. So that again is a discussion for another time.
Right, it was a nice food for us, food for thought too. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and hope to see you next week. And I think it will be our last week to go over. If you want to concentrate on particle parts of Ayatul Kubra's supreme sign, please let me know. Otherwise, we can, Mustafa, maybe take a nice prayer. All prayers are nice, but a unique, nice one from you.
Okay, so I will do, our usual closing. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.